Now, one thing you need to know before we start, you can't just take the rings out of the box, stick them on the pistons and pop them in. It's not uncommon to get an odd-sized ring or a ring that was ground incorrectly at the factory. You need to check each ring in each bore. And when you're done checking that ring in that bore, that ring stays in that bore. So in other words, we're not going to size a ring to cylinder 2 here and then down the road stick it in cylinder number 6. If you number each piston and keep that piston with each hole, so number 2 stays in cylinder number 2, number 3 would stay in cylinder number 3, number 4 and 4, and so on. And when you size the rings, you keep that ring that was sized to cylinder 2 with piston 2. That way you're assured that that ring is fit to that cylinder, and that's the correct way to size these rings. Now, the proper way to do this is take all of the top rings out of the box. Don't mix the tops with the seconds up. Just take all the tops out. Set them up in the valley area of your motor and just slip the ring into each cylinder. So first we're starting with the top ring for cylinder number 2. Going to slip it in place. It helps you if you have a ring squaring tool. This pushes the ring down nice and square into the bore and at the proper depth, because you want to check your ring gaps down between a ½ inch and an inch deep in the bore. Now, if you don't have a ring squaring tool, you can get away with using just a piston and pushing it down and trying to evenly space the piston on the sides where the wrist pin go. Now you can check the gaps inside with a simple feeler gauge. You want to find it until it has a nice snug fit. Now, most stock motors want something between 16 and 18 thousandths, somewhere's right in there. Check your factory specs to be sure when you're building a stock motor. When you're done with that one, go on to the next one. Now, once you've done this to all 8 cylinders, take each ring out and put it with its numbered piston to keep them all together. Now, while you're doing this, the question might come up, what do I do if the ring gaps are either too wide or too small? What do you do? Well, there's a couple things. One thing, if the gap is too wide, you can't put metal back. So you're going to have to get a ring that's 5 thousandths oversized. Then you're going to have to grind it to size or file it to size. Now, if the gap is too small, again, you're going to have to grind it to size. That's not uncommon. This is why you're checking this. I can't tell you how many times I've taken rings out of the box and they look perfectly fine. You put them in and all of a sudden you got one that's got no gap at all. If your ring gap is off, you can break a piston. That's how important it is. All it takes is a couple of thousandths difference and you can have a piston failure. So make sure you check all this, and if it's not correct, make sure you correct it. If you're not sure how to do that, contact the machine shop and tell them what the problem is and they'll help you remedy the problem. Now that we've checked all the top rings, we're ready for the second rings. Now again, this is the same process. Each ring stays with this numbered piston with the same numbered hole. So we're going to start out with this one and follow the same procedure. Slip it in and check the gap. Now when it comes to the oil rings, you don't need to check those, just install them. Now with the Ford being a performance engine, we're going with a Moly ring. Now one thing that you need to know, the machine shop needs to know that you're using a Moly ring because they're going to change the finish on the cylinder bores. The cross-hatching that they're going to put in is going to be a different texture and a different finish. If this is not correctly done for Moly rings, they may not seat correctly. You're going to have rings that have glazed the cylinders. Once you've glazed the cylinders, you're done. You can't go back. Now checking the ring gaps on this motor are the same as we did on the Chevy. You drop them into place. Now these gaps are a little tight because they're a stock spec. This is a performance engine, so we're going to open up the gaps a little bit. Higher horsepower makes higher heat. More heat expands metal more. The metal has to have a place to go. So we're going to cut these rings, we're going to file them a little bit and open the gaps up. Now every set of aftermarket rings and pistons comes with a sheet of paper. This one right here comes with one, and it gives us the recommended ring gaps. Now going by that chart, it tells us we need a ring gap of about 20 thousandths. So we're going to have to open these up 4 or 5 thousandths to meet that. I'm going to show you how to do that. Now hand filing rings is an easy process. The trick is you do it one cylinder at a time. You measure the bore, you find out what the clearance is. Let's say it's 16 thousandths. Okay, and we want a gap of 20. That means we've got to remove 4 thousandths. Okay, that's easily done. We just bring the ring over to a ring grinder, and there's two types of ring grinders. There's a hand grinder, which these are inexpensive. You can buy these just about anywhere. And there's also electric grinders. I'm going to show you the hand grinder first, then I'll show you the Pro way with an electric grinder. Put your ring on there, push it firmly and squarely against the cutting wheel, and give it a few turns. Now after you file this, there's going to be a rough edge on here. Anytime you file something or machine something, it leaves a sharp edge on one side, on the downward side. So get yourself a honing stone or a very fine jeweler's file, and we'll simply take that edge off. Now we don't want the file to be flat and scrape the finish off the ring. You want to be sure it's at a 45-degree angle and give it a push. And we're just taking the edge off of this corner right here. And once you're done with this, slip it back in the bore, square it back up, and check the gap again. Now be careful. Don't go too far. If you remove too much from the ring, you can't put it back, and you're going to have too big of a ring gap. It's going to make your motor smoke. And once you're done with that, repeat this process for all the cylinders for both the top ring and the second ring. Now shops do it a little differently. We use an electric grinder. Now once we've determined the ring gap inside the bore, we put the ring on the machine, center it up, we find our 0, and if we need to take 4 thousandths off, now that we're zeroed, we simply grind 4 thousandths off. And again, take a fine file, or a stone if you have a stone, and again, not flat down, you want to do it at a 45-degree angle. Cut that little edge off. Now you want to be sure you cut it square. The ring gaps have to be square. If they're not square, you're going to have a leakage problem in the cylinder. Now we're ready to install the rings. Now this is an easy process, and it doesn't matter if you're working on a stock motor, a performance motor, or any type of brand of motor. It's pretty much all the same. Now you can do this with your hands or you can do it with a tool, and I'm going to show you both different ways. Either way is easy. Now the first thing you want to do is go ahead and mount your piston and rod in a vise, just lightly in a vise. Be sure to not nick the piston up or anything, but just set it in. That holds it securely for you so you can use your hands freely. Now you're going to start with the lowest ring first and work your way up.